At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
That's the biggest artistic change for me in the last 10 years, is that I finally view my inconsistencies not as my Achilles heel, but as my superpower. Like, I can score a movie, I can do work on political stuff, I can write, I can do all these things. I can be happy, I can be sad, I can be a punk, I can be a hippie. Because I have all those, to quote Walt Whitman, I do contain multitudes. I do, and so do you. I think we all do.
For Alex Ebert, using his various powers to connect with a larger community has always been an underlying goal of his work, which during the past 20-odd years has included endeavors in music, film, politics, and technology. But Alex is best known as the singer, songwriter, and bandleader at the helm of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, the musical collective he started in Los Angeles in 2007, which is around when he and I first met. Hey, it's Jenny LSQ, by the way. Welcome to episode 43 of the LSQ podcast. Thanks so much for pressing play. And special shout out to listeners on Alex's Tuners app. More on that ahead. I still remember the first show I saw Magnetic Zeros play here in Los Angeles, I guess early 2008 at the Regent. It was one of the most genuinely joyful concerts I'd ever attended, and I was instantly a fan. In the years since, Alex has expanded into film scoring, even winning a Golden Globe in 2013 for his score to All Is Lost. And, more recently, he's ventured into the technology space by creating Tuners, an app where users share threaded voice memos. And you can listen to podcasts there, too, including this one. Anyway, that's where this conversation begins, with Alex explaining the genesis of Tuners and his excitement about a community where people actually listen to each other literally. Let's get into it.
Yeah, at first it was like, I was just trying to create like a music app that where I could share stuff without any fanfare, where I'd just be like, oh, I made this song, here it goes, but that had like, I don't know, a sense of community about it or something. And then one thing led to another, and we started to figure out this idea of just like, what if you can upload anything, but you can also just record into it and talk? And it was more like a global voicemail depot. And someone leaves a message, you can respond to their message or leave another one, and you create threads. I'm really into threads and creating conversations. And then through that and voice, we just created this thing. What's fascinating to me about Tuners, though, which I love, which was like an accident in a way, was that I'm so used to using my voice that I didn't really consider. Have you ever left a voice memo with someone, or a voicemail back in the day, and then you erase it because it wasn't quite right, and then you do it again and you erase it and it wasn't quite right? Oh,
yes. Because
your voice, the timbre, the thing, the way the intonation, the cadence, and you try it again. There's something about the voice that I had forgotten because I'm so used to singing, I guess, that's really naked, much more so than a photograph or even video. Something about the voice alone. So we have a lot of users on our app that don't, the majority, 90% of the users on the app don't record their voice onto the app. And every one of them has told that I've spoken to has told me that they're just so afraid they've tried it and they're like, no, I can't just speak on this thing. And you might not know too, you might be oblivious too, because you're always using your voice and speaking publicly essentially with these kind of things. But I mean, still to this day, I think for me, one notch above doing stand-up comedy is literally just delivering a speech. Talking conversation's one thing, but delivering like a 45-minute speech, like, man, I've done like Bernie Sanders and that crew is like invited, and do a speech, and it's just like so daunting to do that. And I've kind of done that on a small scale, but it's usually with the aid of music or something like that. But anyway, so then they'll say that they're afraid of doing that. But what happens because of that crucible of having to get over it, having to listen to your speech, having to work through the fear of your voice being naked on the thing, so far in the app, there's an immense reverence for one another in terms of, there's just an immense reverence overall. Like I've never been in a social media environment at all where everyone is so sort of deferential, respecting of each other. And I think it's because of this crucible that each one of the users has to go through to get over the fact of their voice, and they understand what that took, and because other people are speaking, they understand that they had to do that too, and there's sort of like a reverence for the fact that you're even there naked on the beach together. It's like, okay,
interesting.
It's really cool. So it's almost become it's become a community that's like, I wouldn't say self-helpy, but kind of like group therapy, like where people will disclose really personal stuff, knowing that they're going to be sort of held, or that the space will be held for them. No one's gonna be like, haha, you idiot. Like, there's none of that.
Right.
Because your voice would be the mark. It would sort of make this mark on your soul or something. There's some other quality
maybe
to it.
It's maybe hearing someone's voice engenders an empathy that seeing their picture doesn't, or something.
I think so too.
I mean, I would imagine that discovering that the people were using it this way is one of the things that you're stoked to have so far taken out of that. Is like, it turns out you can have this kind of community and civility in a social media environment, which is probably a pleasant surprise about it. But I'm also curious, just what have you found that you've gotten out of the process of contributing to it, all of the different audio that you put on there?
Well, I've had to work through, you think as an artist, like, okay, I'm courageous as an artist, I'm willing to express certain personal things, but you realize there's always another layer to peel. Waking up in the morning with a groggy voice and being like, telling people that you don't feel so hot, or that you're working through like a depressive moment, or whatever it is, has turned out to be another layer of the onion that, like, removed of any sense of like being on a pedestal of any kind, being a rock star of any kind, just a dude who woke up in the morning fucked up. You know what I mean? And
no editing, no
nothing,
filter,
no visual. You can't, like, is he handsome? Is he fucking, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just some craggy voice telling you that, like, I'm in a weird place. There's nothing to aid me other than that. And that's been a new layer for me. And I've found it really, it's not like it was super difficult, and I was like sort of quivering with anxiety about sort of talking about personal things like that, but there was definitely, there is still actually an ongoing bravery to it for me, like jumping in cold water each time, where it's like, just let it go. Just let it do. Share with these people. It's been cool. I mean, it's a small community, so like at scale, who knows? But we're making it so that you can cordon off any community you want, kind of like in like a WhatsApp group.
Right.
So there'll still be the public feed, but then you can have different groups.
And how long has it been publicly accessible?
I think it's been a year.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, for listeners, Alex and I have known each other for quite a long time now, and you've done so many. I mean, since we first started talking in realms like this, you've done so many other different kinds of things. The film scoring stuff and this kind of technology stuff and just human outreach kind of stuff. And obviously you just had a record come out just yesterday.
Yeah.
So happy album release day after.
Thanks. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that this album is under the moniker Same Dude. Is it sort of?
I changed it.
You changed it.
I changed it at the
but
last
that is a sort of that is a sort of
phrase.
tag.
That is a tagline.
It's a tagline for
Yeah.
this particular creative thing.
Yeah.
Which immediately, as someone who's been paying attention to your music for a long time, it's like it makes sense as a tagline because
What's almost kind of funny, like perfect that I changed it, because that it's all the same dude, and then I changed that it's the same dude, but because it is the same dude.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, I guess, like if in this sort of 10 years that you and I have known each other now, like the concept that you have to remind people that it's okay to be have contradictions in you, or that it's okay to like different stuff.
Right.
Do you feel more sort of at peace with that now than when we first met?
That's the big change for me. That's the biggest artistic change for me in the last 10 years, is that I finally view my inconsistencies not as my Achilles heel, but as my superpower. And it took a second for me to figure that out, that my inconsistencies are actually my greatest strength. Like, I can score a movie. I can make this kind of music. I can work on political stuff. I can write. I can do all these things. I can be happy. I can be sad. I can be a punk. I can be a hippie. Because I have all those, to quote Walt Whitman, I do contain multitudes. Like, I do. And so do you. I think we all do. We just get really caught up in the idea of, brand consistency, and there's reasons for that, and there's really legitimate reasons for that. But for me,
the reasons are commercial.
They're almost exclusively commercial.
Yeah.
And
they make you believe that people will tune out, no pun intended, if you aren't consistent.
Yeah.
And they underestimate the intelligence of people who liked the first thing you did, that they would be not smart enough to understand how this next different thing could possibly be, the same dude.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's hard when you're young not to just get defensive and be like, how dare you try to describe me and then try to re-describe me?
Yeah, I mean, I think that absorbing a lot of sort of, he was in I'm a Robot, now he's in Edward Sharpe, he didn't have a beard, now he has a beard, you can't trust this guy, everything, he's a fake hippie, or whatever it is, like absorbing all of that, I anticipated that, actually. I knew that was going to happen, and yet, for me, I didn't come out and be like, I could have probably done better to be like, I was in I'm a Robot, and now I'm starting something else, but for me, that wasn't really my process. I was in a sort of gestation sort of period, and even up and through the first album. So I wasn't even like really able to look back at I'm a Robot and even understand what that was, because it had just, the process of being on that major label and doing that band had destroyed so much of my relationship with art that I didn't even really know how to claim it. But yeah, I mean, the idea of just being able to just fuck a brand, and just like make the next thing, follow the muse wherever it goes, was important to me even then. But I was a little bit more aware of sort of people's what especially the gatekeepers, like the reviewers and those kinds of people, what some of their responses would be. And I was also really aware of the I think back then my biggest artistic change and the most important thing to me back then was my new kind of punk rock was being able to be earnest in an environment that completely discouraged earnestness in rock and roll. It was all about whatever the opposite of earnestness is.
Yeah, well, yeah, there was I mean, if we're talking about whatever, so 2008, the sort of crescendo of irony or something.
Right.
That, and I love some of the culture that came out of that.
Of course.
And that's but I think it's also interesting, something you never could have anticipated, that there would be this then move toward music that it was directly derivative of Magnetic Zeros, and that would become a huge commercial, a massive commercial phenomena.
Yeah.
That would send any kind of like real artist running for the hills in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when even by the time we were making our second album, that had already happened. Like there was already this sort of milieu of sort of reverberations of dun 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 dun. Hey, it's like the
It's like you're gonna
acoustic
see
guitar.
some beards
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
everybody.
yeah. Watch
Get
out for the
ready.
beards, and we're gonna sell some Priuses or whatever the hell. And I remember I'd written like Home Part Two, basically like Four on the Floor, da 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 da, like a real sort of banger, like follow up to Home for the second album. And I saw that happening, and I was just like, I can't put this on the album. I can't take advantage. I can't participate in this.
It was too easy.
It was too easy, and it felt derivative of myself. It felt, because all these other things had been derivative, now suddenly I'm being derivative of the derivative thing. It was too wild. And
in retrospect,
yeah.
the you of now, would you release that song?
In retrospect, I'm more at a place where I would have been comfortable releasing anything that I felt sounded good and felt good.
Right.
I was a little proactive in my sort of like, my righteousness.
Right.
Yeah.
It's borders on self-sabotage.
It's a little, it can be self-sabotaging. Brian, actually, my manager, sent the song to me recently. He's like, remember this song? And I was just like, fuck, yeah. But yeah, it can border on self-sabotage. But I think at the same, there's a certain sort of reverence I have for the idea of not repeating sort of past successes. But yeah, I think that now I'm more at a place where if a song, look, you grew up in the 90s too. Like there was a whole selling out thing that used to happen that doesn't even exist anymore. Like there is no such thing. Like kids, I don't even think even know what that is. Like selling out now is like mixing your brand with maybe another brand that isn't your brand, but they don't have any idea that like Kendrick Lamar doing an Amex commercial in the 90s would have been like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the most credible dude doing an Amex commercial would have been crazy.
Yeah.
But the logistics changed. Money stopped being made by album sales, and then the Medici moved in. The Coca-Colas, the Pepsis, the Amexes, and they're the ones supporting the art. So it's not that I like put my rubber stamp on the way that things are today, but there is a certain aspect of liberty, of artistic liberty that has engendered, which is like, okay, pop music is cookie cutter bullshit, but some of the songs are fucking dope, and I'm allowed to enjoy them. And I wasn't I'd never allowed myself to enjoy anything like that before.
What was when did you start to let it in?
My fucking kid, dude, being a dad, because
your kid likes regular radio stuff.
I mean, she'll listen to she just likes songs that she likes. Yep. And I'll be like, okay, this is a kid without any preconceived notions. This is a real bellwether, like an actual bellwether. This isn't some like hip person with like a whole set of like preconditioned notions about what's cool. Like she's just responding to music. And I have to give that some kind of credence. Otherwise I'm turning a blind eye to like a genuine response to music. And that's been eye-opening. Right.
And what sort of stuff did you end up liking? Because she liked it, other than Frozen soundtrack.
Well, like she loves that song "I'm Blue." I'm blue, yeah, don't diva. Remember that old ass song? And that's a song that I was always just like, yeah, that's a funny, weird, silly song. But like she'll like songs like in that zone, or songs I never really heard before that were like massive hits in Europe, because her mom will play her like sort of like dance, like 90s dance house sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then she loves Taylor Swift, like Welcome to New York or something like that. Welcome to New York. It's like it's in movies. It's in like Secret Life of Pets. And so I'll be listening to this stuff, and then my girlfriend would be like, "Oh no, that is a good song," and I'll be like, "Okay," and then we're all listening to it, and I'm listening to this song, and I'm like, and it's just taking me a second, but then like I want to participate in their joy, so I'll just start, like trying to view this stuff in a different way. And
But has it affected your songwriting?
it's I don't know if that I would say it probably has, in the sense that I don't.
I mean, or is it
I'm
like
not sure
trying
that-
to decrypt what is it that makes, what is she responding to? What is your daughter responding to?
It's made it. I will say that it's made it like, when Eartha likes a song of mine, that's like a green light.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I do have that, but I also have a thing where this new album is the most. It's the most I've allowed myself to be sort of like pop in a really long time. The last time I did stuff like this was actually just pre I'm a Robot, and I had forgotten about this era. And concurrent with the last 4 years and making this new album, I started just like checking some of that old, like, it was still called I'm a Robot, but it was like 98 to 2001. And I started just listening to some of that stuff I was making and realizing that before I ever thought of having an audience, I was making music that was in some ways a lot more relatable than anything I had made since then. I was talking about personal emotional stuff as opposed to communally emotional stuff. I was singing melodies that were like really just sort of emotive and pure and basic and naturalistic,
Yeah.
and not trying to be sort of like hyper fancy about anything. I was not trying to enshroud my lyrics at all in poeticism at all. Like, I had stuff where you're like, what the fuck is he talking about? But I had a lot of stuff where it was like, I'm depressed, this is how I feel, this is what's happening, I want you back. Like, stuff that like I haven't touched in fucking decades, you know what I mean?
Right.
Especially with Edward Sharpe, because with Edward Sharpe I was like, I'm above this is about communalism. This is about sort of like, whatever I'm going to express emotionally is going to be sort of this meta expression of communal emotionalism. It's not going to be my own interpersonal daily strife with someone. And there's something intrinsically pop about the latter, about talking about your own personal relationship with a breakup or a thing. And I was just avoiding.
But when
sort
you
of all of
listened to that stuff, did you find that it was better than you would have thought it was?
Yes, but I was also blushing with the amount, with the degree of honesty I was approaching like music with. It's like, there's some of those songs I'm just like, they're gut-wrenchingly honest in a totally embarrassing. But my overriding feeling was, whoever that kid was that I was really fucking brave for saying any of that shit. And I've obviously lost some of that bravery, and I should probably get some of that back. And so that had an effect on this, yeah. Plus, for the very first time in my life, I really had cause. You know, having a kid and having a baby mama and the vision of a family and having that disintegrate was a new level of personal, emotional sort of strain that I hadn't experienced in basically. I'd experienced some of that during the Edward Sharpe time frame, but I just basically couldn't do that because there was too many people in the band. Some of the people I was having the beefs with were in the band, so there's just no room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I read an old interview with you where you told a story about being 6 and writing about a boy who had a crew.
Yeah. Once there was a boy who had a big, strong crew. They traveled the world and went on adventures. They also knew Kung Fu. But I love that big, strong crew thing. It's so, when my mom showed that to me, it was just like, it was so cool to connect that dot, to like be like, I've always known I wanted this sense of community. Like when I was making the Edward Sharpe stuff, before I met any of the guys, the only person I knew was Christian and Jade. But I was making this music, and I would do fake background things and claps and record 85 claps and hays and hoes and tambourines jangling and fake trumpet and piano. I had this vision of this giant traveling troubadour misfit crew that I didn't know yet, but that was the vision. And it was like, when my mom showed me that, like, even since, like, and I always remember that had been something I sort of idealized. And as I grew up and I learned about movements, and as I got political and learned about political movements, or artistically and art movements, and I found out they'd all gather at this one cafe and they'd all do the thing together, or they'd all go out to this place and talk about this together. I was like really, really romanticized that and felt like I never had any of that in this sort of really splayed out diaspora, LA, Los Angeles, like communally sort of, not communally vacant, but like, to get to Thrifty's to get ice cream, I had to bike 25 blocks. Like nothing was close. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember when my parents finally moved to like the flats and I could actually just walk to a gas station and buy Mentos. I was like, this is epic, like, because I felt like I was in a milieu of something, like I was in culture somehow. But I felt like I felt like culture was always at arm's distance.
Because why? Where did you live before you moved to the flats?
We were just in Sherman Oaks, but they were in the hills, and so
Right.
I would like walk my bike down because shit is steep here.
Yeah.
So it's like a real effort, walk my bike down, pretend to be like, like I think I've probably told you this before, but pretend to be sort of like a street kid. I always wanted to be a street kid. Like growing up, upper middle class, I was just like, I'm missing out on something. I just always had this instinct. But to be in the streets and eating ice cream on the corner and having like a fake like switchblade
There's a
like
comb.
hair comb in my hands, like everything was right, you know what I mean? And I got to pretend like I was in like living, but for the most part everything was like at arm's length, and you had to drive everywhere, and not much of a sense of like, oh, my neighbors,
Right. I don't know. I think it's interesting, like, reflecting on the things that you've made and this thread of wanting a community. It's interesting because it also seems like the creative experiences you've had and life experiences remind one that it's hard to keep a group together, that like as much as you might romanticize a crew or community, that the real human component of any group of people more than one is fraught with conflict and the potential for things to fall apart. And at the end of the day, who can you count on but yourself? You know, there is, I think, an interesting like self-reliance that you have as an artist, where I know you're the guy you're doing all of the things. You're making every part of it. You're a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Is that
No, that's
fair?
accurate.
Yeah. And I would imagine at some point in these more recent years, especially with the success of doing the film composing and that kind of work, that you've come to accept that as much as you like community, you also like doing everything. You liked, if I want it done right, I'm going to do it myself kind of person.
That, and there's I think some people are born being more sort of more people or whatever, and really want to sort of, for me, my friends are the ones in whatever moment where I'm doing something with them. If I'm making something with someone and we're being creative together, they're my friends. You know what I mean? And I have friends where we don't do anything, but I don't go to a bar to hang out with friends. I don't, I'll come to a birthday party, but I'm not necessarily going to do a whole bunch more if we're not working on something, unless, I have a very small group of friends that like that doesn't apply to, but it's like 3 people maybe. For the most part, I love making stuff, and I love making stuff with people, and that could be political, it could be music, it could be anything, building a house, it could be literally anything, but I like the process of doing things together with people. That said, that's the vehicle for the community, I'm realizing, for me, in terms of my life. And what's beautiful about the Edward Sharpe thing, though, I gotta say, is that we've really ended up becoming a real, like, family, like a real brotherhood family thing, where even though we haven't toured in 4 years, we really love each other. We have each other's back. Everyone is, like, so supportive of one another. And I think that that's really beautiful, because that is, in so many ways, what I always wanted, is to start, to have a big, strong crew that toured around the world, that, went around the world having adventures, which is exactly what ended up happening. And, we're making another album this year.
Nice.
And, and we tried the writing all together at once, and it was amazing. It was the first time we did it. It was on the last album. On this album, we're going to try a little something different. I'm going to write with each person individually, because, like you said, like there's group dynamics in any group, and so it'd be interesting to sort of be one-on-one, and hopefully even more permission will be felt in the room to explore ideas and fail and all that.
It must be nice just to have that channel open, though, right?
Yeah.
That it's...
Yeah, totally. I mean, sometimes moving to New Orleans and being sort of a hermit when I create on my own and all that, and also there's a certain resentment that naturally happens for me when any success compels me to sort of feel like a cog in a machine. And I did it with I'm a Robot, and I don't want to do it with Edward Sharpe, and I felt like it was starting to happen, where I started thinking about throwing the kitchen out with the kitchen sink or whatever, where it's just like the whole thing I'm now associating with this repetitious capitalist machine that is designed to be ergonomic and economically viable and go from one thing to the other, and that's not the energy that I approached Edward Sharpe with to begin with. I bought a 1984 bus I got like on Craigslist for $9,000, and we gutted it ourselves, and I was adamant that we were never going to play any clubs. We were only going to play like house parties and parks and alleyways, and we're going to just make it work. It's going to be more of a movement than some sort of like operationalized fucking hippie band. It was going to be this thing. And then it just, because of inefficiency and everyone wants to make money and people are quitting their jobs, we just fell into the thing.
Well, you can't not go for it.
You can't not go for it. You can't not go for it. But I wanted to try and go for it in a slightly... I lost track of the dream, and I could have incorporated more of those things. But either way, I ended up feeling like a little bit like, album, touring cycle. I'm in the bus all the time. I'm at this festival and then that, and I just kept being like, this is not necessarily the vision that I initially had. And I started again getting the same thing that happened towards the end of the I'm a Robot cycle, where I was like, what is the reason for me making music again? Like, what's underneath what's driving all this? Because it started to feel like a real business. And I started to lose track of why I was doing it. All right, well, let's make an album because we should. So I just had to step back and step away. But I made sure not to make the mistake of identifying the band and the family with my uncomfortableness with or my discomfort with sort of the capitalist sort of repetition that we ended up in.
And I would imagine that some of the film work showed you like, oh wait, I can do other things. I can do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. The film work in so many ways is what allowed me to be like, okay, because I had the I'm a Robot thing musically and the Edward Sharpe thing musically, and it was like this binary, and I was still in this mode of like, okay, I'm still being perceived as either one thing or the other, or traitor to one or a traitor to the other, in my own head and other people vocally telling me that. But then when I scored music, and it has nothing musically to do with any of the other stuff, it suddenly gave me this like, that third thing destroyed the binary, and suddenly I was like, okay, I can see myself now as someone who, instead of thinking like that I have a choice of what I can be wherever I want to go. And that allowed me to sort of think of things totally differently and decide to be like, okay, fuck the brand. I'm gonna rap. Like, there's enough that I want to say right now that I'm actually gonna rap, or I'm gonna make the music I was making when I was 19, and not thinking of an audience, and career suicide or not. Like, it's about wherever my muse is, and I think that willingness to self-obliterate for the sake of your own creative pulse is important. Yeah.
I think that's a perfect place for us to
wrap
it up. Self-obliteration.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank you so much.
Good night, itchy eyes. Good night, sudden sneeze. Good night to your symptoms of allergies. Xyzal is the allergy medicine you take before bed. It provides powerful relief while you rest your head. Not just all night, but all the next day. Zysol keeps working, keeping allergies at bay. And without those annoying symptoms disturbing your rest, you can wake up the next morning feeling your absolute best. Remember, be wise all. Take Zysol. At night.
You know what's smart? Enjoying a fresh gourmet meal at home that you didn't have to cook. Meet Factor, your loophole in the laws of mealtime. Chef-crafted meals delivered with a tap, ready in just 2 minutes. You know what's even smarter? Treating yourself without cheating your goals. Factor is dietitian approved, chef prepared, and you plated. Pretty smart, huh? Refresh your routine and eat smart with Factor. Learn more at factormeals.com.
If you want to find out more about that awesome new solo album of Alex's that we discussed, I vs. I, there are tunes and videos, including a new version of a standout track called Stronger, over on his website, which is samedude.com, where a 5 is in place of the S, and that's also where you can find out more about the Tuners app. Thanks again to Alex for taking the time to do this, and also thanks to his manager and our dear friend Brian Ling for setting it up and making sure I had plenty of Diet Coke. Love you, Bri. The next episode of LSQ, episode 44, out in a few weeks, will feature an interview with Tune-Yard's Merrill Garbus. That was an awesome conversation as well. Can't wait to share it. And subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Also, feel free to reach me with feedback any old time on Twitter and Instagram at JennyLSQ. Stay safe, y'all.